I would like to start our common session. I'm very grateful for your time. In specific, because in Central Europe, we are at late afternoon, whereas our friends in Middle and South America, they are still at noontime. And so it's a, let's say, with special gratitude, I have to thank all those who are attending in this conference. The people giving presentations today are Markus Kommenda, who is the first one in a row. Markus works at the Austrian Institute of Technology, the Austria's largest R&D organization, which I had the honor and the pride to conduct in earlier years. So Markus was not yet there at that time when I was heading it, but we met later on occasion of discussions on IT strategies for Austria. Hannes and Anna, as I mentioned before, they are both working for United Sustainability. They both completed their academic studies, and they certainly will introduce themselves a little bit more on this. But since they are co-presenting, they have the disadvantage to have only the 20 minutes of presentations, so not to lose too much time on your self-presentation. And finally, Roland Schatz, he is the CEO of an organization called UNCSI, and he will better present himself what this organization is. Roughly speaking, it's an organization which supports or prepares investments at large scale for companies and public units which are engaged in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But this is a very rough introduction. Roland will introduce himself once it's his turn. So starting with Markus, we had a discussion before this session on an academic level on the issue of post-truth society. I had the pleasure to talk to Markus yesterday, and we already prepared some kinds of ideas how he would make his presentation. So Markus, the stage is yours.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, depending on where you are following us. Before I start with my presentation, let me say a few words about my home institution, which is AIT, the Austrian Institute of Technology. As you already said, Professor Koch, AIT is the largest application-oriented research organization in Austria. AIT comprises 7 so-called centers, which are aligned with the grand challenges of our society, such as energy, health, transport, etc. I am working in the Center for Digital Safety and Security, and our mission there is to develop digital technologies for highly reliable systems and a secure society. To this end, we work in close cooperation with our partners in industry and in the public sector. Now coming to disinformation. The term disinformation has become increasingly common in recent years. While the term has many synonyms, the best known being fake news, it is only one facet of the much larger problem, namely the manipulation of public opinion to influence the real world. Fake news is presented to us in various forms and types, such as manipulated text or even fully computer-generated text, manipulated images, faces in particular, or again, faces that have been generated by a computer, manipulated videos, or simply genuine content, but taken out of context. Many of these fakes are typically generated with the help of artificial intelligence. Deceptive statements in social media are probably the most dangerous form of disinformation and also the most difficult to handle. Over the past 2 years, we have seen many of such deceptive statements in the context of the COVID crisis. Disinformation can be part of internet fraud and thus harm both businesses and consumers. Some examples are online scams, fake shops, charity fraud, online ticket fraud, fake product reviews, etc. But disinformation has also become a serious threat to our society and democracy. We all remember the 2020 presidential election in the US and the subsequent Capitol attack, or conspiracy theories in the context of the COVID pandemic. Even worse, disinformation has become an essential part of today's hybrid warfare, as we see it during the current crisis in Ukraine. To give you just one example, a manipulated video of President Volodymyr Zelensky was uploaded to a hacked Ukrainian news website on March 16th this year. The false video was a so-called deepfake, which means that it was generated by means of a deep neural network. It appears to show Zelensky addressing the nation and encouraging citizens to lay down their arms. One version of this deepfake was viewed more than 200,000 times on Twitter. So what can we do? Disinformation is, of course, a very broad phenomenon involving several actors. By the way, this week, the so-called Digital Services Act entered into force in the European Union, and this will oblige major social media networks such as Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, and also search engines such as Google, to take a much stricter action against disinformation, illegal content, and hate speech. Now, from a technical viewpoint, we can offer various tools supporting in particular the detection of fakes and also forensic investigations. I mentioned that that most fakes are generated with the help of AI. Conversely, it is AI that enables us to detect these fakes. At AIT, we have a number of projects in this area, mostly with funding from our National Security Research Program and from the European Union. One of our flagship projects is Defalsify, the name of which stands for detection of false information using AI. To this end, we extract information from large amounts of data from various media. We analyze this data using classical image, video, and language processing, but also machine learning and artificial intelligence methods. We then aggregate and fuse the results in order to give a human user a comprehensive picture and to support her or his decision making. The overall goal of this project Defalsify is then to provide a web-based tool to assist in the detection of this information. And for this, we have developed several modules which operate on various modalities such as text, image, audio, video, and in addition, metadata and information from various open sources. And I will now give you a few examples. This is a picture from a G7 meeting in Germany back in 2015. In this example, we used a neural network which we trained on about 2 million images. It extracts specific features from the image and detects local anomalies. The result on the right shows which parts of the image have probably been manipulated. Another module of our tools serves to estimate the location where an image was taken. And we can do this from the picture's pixels only. So this might seem quite easy for the case of Salzburg here in the middle, and also for Havana on the right. But as you can see on the left, we even achieve this location in the case of the G7 picture, where we only have some landscape in the picture. Here's another example. In this case, we trained our neural network with 125 images from various sources. And then we carried out tests with several benchmark data sets. And in these tests, we achieved 95 to 99.8% correctness. I think it's worth saying that the results of all these tool components are certainly not yes or no. They just give probabilities. Therefore, it's important to then show the results in a way so that the user can decide on herself or himself. And this is what we do. Defaultify just assists the human user in the detection of this information. And as I said, we consider all forms of digital content, such as text, image, audio, video. And in addition to that, the metadata contained in a file and other information from various open sources. The media content is analyzed with several components operating on these various modalities, and then the different components' results are fused to one overall recommendation. And this recommendation is presented to the user in a comprehensive and transparent way, which is easily understandable also for non-experts. So this concludes my short presentation. Thank you for your attention. Güenter, you're muted.
Thank you for this. That should not happen with the moderator that is muted. Well, thank you very much. It gives us a perfect introduction for our discussions. Since we have a little bit of time, let me start just to fuel the discussion. Who are your customers?
Well, it's not only customers, it's partners, actually. And these partners are media, for instance, the Austrian Press Agency, but also public authorities, of course. The Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Defense in particular. Apart from that, we have, of course, industrial partners who develop our technologies further and make products out of them.
Here, co-presenters, do you have any questions, any curiosity? Hannes, please.
Yeah, I would be interested in how the big companies and foundations like OpenAI or AI Foundation, how do they fit into the picture? Are they supporting the work? Are you in any contact? What is their stance on the whole topic and the work that you're doing, since they are mainly developing the models like GPT-3, Dolly, and so on that are used to generate them in the first place?
Yes, we do cooperate with some of these companies as well. Actually, I'm not involved in the project myself, so I don't have the complete picture. But of course, as you say, they have some large interest, and all of this will become even more important due to this Digital Services Act in the European Union. All the large operators of social networks, etc., they will be obliged to first tell the European Commission the number of their users and then tell them how they are going to apply artificial intelligence in order to prevent disinformation, hate speech, etc. So yeah, all these companies will have their role in the coming years.
Well, I think it's a good example how AI can be used for the good and for the bad. And in Austria, I would claim we have a lot of discussions on the ethical dimensions on applying AI. I think also Austrian Institute of Technology is engaged in that. And also I would claim that the European Union as a whole is much more conscious about these questions than we observe in any other part of the world. So with this, let's say, commenting statement, and also looking to my watch, I would like to move, if you like, Markus, to the next presentation. Thank you again, and we will have a common discussion at the very end of our session. So Hannes and Anna, you have organized yourself in going for a co-presentation. I'm very curious what you will tell. The two of them now will move us from, let's say, the technical fake discussion to some other dimension of faking, which is, for example, greenwashing. And I make this bridge to your contribution because I know that you are very much engaged in sustainability reporting and all the different standards underway, all the legislation and regulation which is going on, etc. You are the two perfect experts on that. Please take the word.
Thank you very much. That was a perfect transition to our presentation. I'm just sharing my slides and starting the presentation. Is it working? Are you seeing the slides here? And now in full screen? Yeah, okay. So maybe just to complete the introduction that you already gave us, Güenter, Anna Katharina Meyer and myself, we are both working and also doing research in the field of corporate sustainability management. Anna is just doing her PhD in that field. And the presentation that we're holding is concerned, like it's called, Towards a Corporate Management Standard of Strong Sustainability. And it looks in the context of the Anthropocene and of sustainable development at the private sector and at the management standards that are used there for disclosing and reporting on sustainability information. So this is where the topic of this panel, fact versus fakes, comes in, because the methods that corporates are using for disclosing their sustainability impacts, as good as they are, as transparent will be the picture that we can get from the actual impacts that corporates have on the planet. So I will start with point 1 and point 2, and will then hand over to Katharina. And I will first talk about the so-called information-based regulation and reporting approach. That is like the main paradigm that we had been following the last 25, 30 years in means of reporting and regulating corporate sustainability management. And then I will go on in the second part to talking about what would be a managing standard for strong sustainability. I will elaborate on that term then. And then I will hand over to Anna, who will talk about how we can get towards an integrated sustainability accounting, which would be like one of the solutions. And she will present the institutions and the constellation that is heading towards something like a sustainability or also natural capital accounting. And then we will just close with a conclusion. So, information-based regulation and reporting, shortcomings of current sustainability management. When we look at the field of corporate sustainability management, we are in the face of escalating ecological crises and still rising material use, and we had no transformative economic change until today. And that led to sharp criticism towards sustainability management for not delivering on its promises, namely getting corporates on a more sustainable path. In the reporting and accounting literature, this led towards a high degree of so-called cynicism and disbelief, how this author is coining it. About the overall low impact that sustainability reporting had towards leading the world and especially the private sector on a more sustainable path. That's the status quo in the sustainability literature and research. What does that mean? A little bit more concrete. It means that when we look at the fields of standards for sustainability or CSR reporting, as Accountancy Europe said, there are hundreds of non-financial information reporting frameworks and standards that are leading to confusion and the potential for greenwashing, because there are simply too many, and the way those frameworks force companies to report on are extremely different. So companies can often pick which suits them best, and this opens a big space for greenwashing. And then the second problem that is very closely connected to that is that ESG ratings for investors, which build mainly on the information basis of sustainability reporting standards, have a very, very low rate of reproducibility. So there is the term aggregate confusion that was coined by Berg and his team, that is basically saying that in one ESG rating, you could have a company that ranks on the top 10%, which is at the very bottom in another one. And so it's very difficult for investors to gain a clear picture on the sustainability impacts of companies that could guide their decisions, their investment decisions in any way. So what's the reason for that? Of course, that's like a difficult question to answer, but I brought up two reasons that I think are very important to explain the status quo. First of all, after the Earth Summit in Rio in 1902, the world knew that they had to get corporates at the table when talking about sustainable development. It was not merely a political topic anymore. And the so-called information-based approach was chosen, which says that instead of having hard regulations that would dictate how corporates have to behave, the information-based regulation approach had the idea that first, reporting publicly on sustainability impacts would lead to improvements, because stakeholders like customers and investors would reward companies that are more sustainable. This would change the way the markets work. It would bind market performance closer to sustainability performance and would change therefore how markets works and the competition in them. And in the course of that, the methods for sustainability management would become better and better over time. And when we look back today and see at this very pessimistic view that most researchers have on current sustainability reporting, we must say that this regulation approach has very much failed. And but it's very hard to change it, since all new regulations that we are getting built on the last 20 years of trying to regulate corporate sustainability management. A second reason is that in this vacuum that was created by not having an adequate standard for managing sustainability, the so-called managerialization of corporate sustainability management happened, which, to sum it up simply, is the opinion in the research that sustainability management got subordinated to corporate interests and became more a means for marketing, and for also dismantling the actual impacts, what is meant by the term greenwashing. So how can we get from this disappointing status quo to a system that is able to manage sustainability for companies? And I said on the slide before, it's about managing strong sustainability. And the idea of strong sustainability is that every action that we have towards our world must stay within the ecological boundaries of the world. So an action is sustainable if it leads to the build-up of biocapacity and the build-up of natural capital, and not to its degradation. And the most famous picture to show what that means is the planetary boundaries here, that define a safe operating space in which all our actions and our economy must stay in order to be sustainable, and differentiates this in, you could say, the different spheres of sustainability. And what is red says that we are beyond that. And then how would a corporate management standard that manages these ecological boundaries, which are the basis of strong sustainability, had to look like? When you have, I put it, the science in the middle, and then we would have two layers around it that I symbolized here with the two circles. The one would be, we need multilateral agreements to first say that we want as a society to respect these planetary boundaries. And then second, we would need standardized methods for corporates to actually act on them. For example, I will skip that slide. In the course of climate change, we progressed very far, and that means we had the multilateral agreements, the United Nations framework on the Convention on Climate Change. We had the Paris Agreement that said we need to be within the 1.5 degrees. And then we had pledges by all nations saying we will cut emissions to that. And second, the greenhouse gas protocol became the global management standards for corporates to reporting on their emissions. So, and we could say if all apply that standard and stay within their range of emissions, we can get a grab on solving the climate crisis. Of course, there are many problems still with that, but the pathway is kind of here, the methodological pathway. Looking, for example, at biosphere integrity, so biodiversity, we also have the multilateral agreement, the Convention on Biological Diversity, but maybe this will change in December on the COP15. But until today, there is no multilateral agreement that would cut this down to actual limits for nations or to any direct action plan. And there are also no standardized methods that are would be in any way comparable to how it's done in climate change for corporates to report on biosphere integrity and to stay within the safe operating space that would be important from a strong sustainability perspective. And then my last slide, just a quick overview to where we stand in the development of designing a strong sustainability standard for corporates. The green arrows, the filled green arrows, say we have a solution here beside climate change. That is the stratospheric ocean depletion, where governments in 1991 just said that FCKW can't be used anymore because it led to ocean depletion. We partly started on regulating biosphere integrity and land system change with the new biodiversity framework and a new management standard, especially in the European Union, that is starting to design quantitative measurements and make them mandatory for corporates. But as you see, the whole picture is incomplete, and there is a long way to go to have that for all sustainability aspects, so to say, that would lead us on a path and to true sustainability, and that would bind corporates to the goals of sustainable development. So, and now I'm handing over to Anna.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe to better understand our work, it's interesting to also present myself just for a second. I'm working at the University of Düsseldorf in the Department for Accounting and Controlling, and in a company together with Hannes at United Sustainability. And the two of us, together with Daniel Dahm, decided to do some research on what needs to change to overcome all the shortcomings Hannes just explained we have. And he started to somehow show what is needed in the future, and I will just go into a little bit more detail of it. And to just introduce my part of the presentation, I'm defining sustainability accounting. Hannes already talked about strong sustainability, and sustainability accounting is actually something which needs to take place parallel to sustainability reporting, but is very underestimated until now. And in the context, in the business context for long, the reporting topic is getting more and more sophisticated, but sustainability accounting, which is a basis actually for reporting, is not spoken of that much. And in 1993, there was given a definition for strong sustainability, and in 2000, Schaltegger and Burrit, they explained that sustainability accounting is a strategy to actually manage what in the longer term you should report. And what I see is that very many companies now starting to report, and they are having other companies telling them how to report in the exact right way, to follow all the legislation and the regulation, but that not many really concentrate on how to manage and how to account for better serving the environment or social aspects or governance aspects. So the step before the reporting is not yet considered sufficiently. This is what we identified. I'm also skipping the citation, this quote, but I'm sure you will be able to receive also the material afterwards. And what did we do then to figure out what is needed to overcome this challenge? We decided to use the methodological approach of constellation analysis. And constellation analysis is based on actor network theory, and the most interesting aspect of it of it is that we're looking at shifts in socio-technical systems. So we are all living in systems, and different actors, different elements come together in different constellations. And we believe, this is our hypothesis, that this constellation needs to change in order to more specifically concentrate on accounting, and on the right accounting, the one Hannes just asked for, the one which is really based, taking the planetary boundaries as a strong basis for decision making. And here's what we identified. On the right corner, you see how the different elements are named. Here on the left, which is in this squared, it's the actors, and then comes the technical elements, the symbolic elements, and the natural elements. And this is something which the method of constellation analysis defined. So this is not that we came up with these 4 different elements. But we, of course, in a multi-disciplinary process, defined what to write into these fields, and we defined who are the relevant actors in the field, who are the technical elements, for example, the accounting system as it is, the reporting frameworks, the valuation standards, also very important. It's very important to understand which value we give to different natural capitals, but also to understand how to value different materials or externalities, and the true cost accounting initiatives as something which we also need to have in mind as an element which affects the whole scenery. And then we have the symbolic elements. So what are we discussing? What systems are we striving for? And what objectives, what goals do we consider relevant as the community of companies and states and so on? And the natural elements, like the planetary boundaries. Then we also showcase the sustainability zero line, which was elaborated by Daniel Dahm, who defines that everything which is not increasing the natural capital or the social capital or the cultural capital is underneath the sustainability zero line. And this is a concept which we also consider a natural element because it has this very strong scientific background. And the tipping points, which are also scientifically proven, and geotechnical databases, which are the foundation of any accounting when applied. Then we looked at how these different elements, wait a second. Okay. How the different elements changed, and they changed because of significant events and changes. For example, the ESG criteria somehow changed the whole scenery. The sustainability reporting directive and related standards for reporting, like the GRI standards, and of course the ongoing legislation processes like the EU taxonomy, which for the first time actually which is somehow helping to not only have this reporting aspect, but to price different processes and materials differently for the future. Then we draw this constellation, how it is right now. You see it looks like a great chaos whereas the different elements are not very well aligned and somehow not well connected. And in our multidisciplinary sessions, we found out that the constellation should rather look like this one. And I recommend taking these two constellations next to each other to really see the differences. But what I can already tell you now, for this integrated sustainability accounting, for example, a multi-capital focus is needed. This is something which is not even there at the status quo yet. So here, with the multi-capital focus, we mean that the natural capital is as important as the financial capital, and the different capitals have to be in the focus of an integrated sustainability accounting. And the IPBES for the biodiversity and the IPCC for climate-related issues are on the top of everything, giving the scientific baseline for our decision-making. I will not go too much into detail here because I'm already running out of time, but the fundamentals of the integrated sustainability accounting are quite important and need to be shared. So this is the overall linking of the consumption capacity of natural capital with each individual company. So for actual decision making, this is quite crucial. And that the accounting system yet does not recognize to integrate externalities and the cost of consumption to the restoration is not yet included fully, or fully is actually a little bit exaggerated. It's not included at all right now. And the intergenerational needs are not yet aligned. So this would be some fundamental which has to be the basis for an integrated sustainability accounting. And to sum up all of what we just said, I want to conclude that the current methods, the ones Hannes described and the ones I described in the status quo constellation analysis, are not suitable yet for measuring and controlling sustainability. And of course, not for reporting at all then, because the fundamentals are missing. And this is not yet discussed sufficiently from our point of view. And even though a new framework to combat ecosystem degradation and biodiversity loss will be adopted, we need better standards for translating this into the corporate action and into decision making, because it's just not sufficient. If you record what Hannes said, we are not yet entering the second level of his picture, and this is crucial for making sure that strong sustainability is implemented. And if these new standards, which we have in mind, which can made possible with different constellations of actors, of elements, then an integrated sustainability accounting would be possible, and from our point of view is strongly needed and has to be, of course, aligned with all the planetary boundaries.
Oh, thank you.
Assume that this is the end of your part, Anna.
It is, yes, it is.
It is, okay. Thank you very much. This was a perfect cooperation between the two of you. A lot of questions I would have, but I would at this point in time also indicate that if outsiders want to contribute with questions or discussions, please use the chat function. Since we have a little bit of time after each of the presentations, I would like to open the discussion. Maybe any of us has any question. Maybe Roland, who is also very much interested, as I know, in the questions you raised in specific in how reporting should look alike in order to take decisions. He will present it anyway, I think, but maybe there's already a question to the two of you. Roland, you have to demute if you...
Yeah. I would like to repeat a question which I had already last week in Sharm el-Sheikh when I was sitting in front of this group from the sustainable stock exchanges who were proudly showing progress on their ESG reporting, which they claimed that if they finalize the whole approach by the end of 2024, that they are fully in line with their goals. And it hit me a little bit by surprise for two reasons. Number one, when I was listening to the different representatives of the stock exchanges, as well as from IOSCA and the other representatives, that I had the impression that I'm still in a conversation which is from the last century, because ESG reporting is nice, but we are, since the 25th September 2015, in a new compass, which is called SDG, including the 169 targets. And I feel a little bit irritated that a whole industry with so many scholars around the world is still talking about the ESGs and trying to catch up with the ESGs and make that workable, while the world has decided to have a more precise compass, which are the SDGs and the 169 targets. And I would like to understand a little bit more why it seems obviously a little bit complicated, and why the finance sector, who has not really illustrated, including the accounting part of that sector, to recognize that the world has moved forward. And if they continue moving at the speed, and when I talk about they, I'm talking mainly about the stock exchanges, including the accounting industry and research experts, if you move or continue moving at that speed, how will we meet in December 2030 when the SDGs actually should be implemented?
Okay, good question. Excellent question to the two of you. Anna?
I think that the ESG criteria and the SDGs are two different approaches that never matched until today. So ESG criteria are mainly meant to include so-called non-financial information into investment strategies. So it's a financial approach of how can we secure our investments. And since we know that sustainability-related risks are getting more and more important and threatening our assets, those criteria got developed. But it's focused on the companies and the asset approach, while the SDGs are a completely different systemic approach, focusing on where do we want to go as a world community. And I think that there are many approach to investing that are more aligned with SDGs. There are frameworks that also include that try to include the Sustainable Development Goals into decision making, but they are simply not important yet for the finance community, and that is there is that debate on materiality, like what information is important for investors. And of course, as long as you don't have regulation on that, investors will include what is financially material. And since the SDGs are focusing more on a systemic level, they go way beyond financial materiality, and therefore there is still that mismatch that you are observing, I guess.
I would take the following decision, since not to run out of time in respect to the contribution Roland has to do by his original contribution. This discussion already starts, but Roland, maybe that introducing yourself and your organization, you can keep in mind what has been started to be discussed, and maybe at the end we have enough time still to continue on what is underway. Roland, if you would take the word.
Oh, with pleasure. Maybe just one word so you understand a little bit better from where I come. I myself, I'm lucky to be the 5th generation journalist in my family, and at home since beginning we were all discussing only one question, which is the quality of information. And with a grandfather who was one of the first receiving a telegram in 1933 that he would no longer be allowed to serve as a journalist, you get an idea from where I'm coming from. I first tried to escape this family background by becoming a pianist. And when you try to serve music, Bach and Beethoven and these friends, there is one major difference to all the other sciences which I then learned later on in my life. There's a clear understanding what the tones are when you think about the Moonlight Sonata or the H-Moll Messe. When somebody performs it, the audience happens to know whether the performance is more or less in line or not. I couldn't become a pianist, so I thought what I should do. So I said, yeah, I become a journalist like the rest of my family. But in order to do so, I decided to study economy at the beginning, because I thought that science would get me grounded and provide all the values which I was lacking spending years in the arts. And I had the impression that this decision was wrong the moment when I was listening to Max Böhmle, who was our accounting professor in Fribourg at the university, who basically stood in front of us telling us that if an annual report done by a company is done in the best of its way, it would capture 70% of the value of a company. But usually annual reports are not done in this best way, and you have to deal with 50% or less. And I was sitting there listening to him, and I thought back into my old world that this would mean that I can stand in front of an audience and play the Moonlight Sonata only with my left hand or only with my right hand. That's 50%. And you all can imagine how far I would get. Latest after 1 minute, people would throw tomatoes, and very right so. Unfortunately, when it comes to accounting standards, not a lot has been improved ever since then. I was lucky to be part of the group around Bob Eccles and Sam Di Piazza when they wrote their book Value Reporting Revolution. The whole debate about integrated reporting, etc., is very close to my heart. But I don't see a lot of improvement. We touched upon fake news very early in this debate. And while we all have this impression that fake news is only something which is artificially created, like the example we got that somebody claims this is the Mr. Zelensky, but we actually don't see him in real. If we go back to what unifies us in this moment, the simple process of trying to find out whether what a company did last year and what they plan to do in future, that this is reflected in the legal binding annual report, we very quickly come to the conclusion that the financial section of the annual report is as vague as Max Böhmle pointed it out to us back in 1984. We are extremely accurate on whether we present all our train tickets and the hotel receipts, etc. And if you dare miss out on one, or if you add hotel receipts where it's not just you as a representative of a company or a foundation or a government, but if you include your family member, we hit everything out of you. But the simple question whether all the add-on of these costs are really the costs which are of interest either to an investor or a consumer, whereas, for instance, the costs which are not visible yet in the annual report, which simply come from the fact that a company is not really that much dedicated to the SDGs in my language today, or to ESG in your language, and therefore they are enjoying cutting corners like a Deutsche Bank with 7,000 court cases and not able to even define the risk they are facing because of the 7,000 court cases, which are material, combined to all the other shortcomings from not having a proper accounting in place, which probably provides 10 times higher risks assessments, not only to the finance sector, but to all industries. I got very much interested in what Bob Eccles and Sam Di Piazza tried to achieve back then. And I recall very well that back in the 90s, when we had this exchange, whether it was in America or whether it was in Frankfurt or in other places, people were looking at us rather, like the little idiots who are asking questions which the big gurus from finance should not even be asked. 10 years later, when back then the CEO of Allianz Global Investors bought PIMCO, and he tried to convince Bill Gross to accept criteria of sustainability into his investment decisions, he had difficulties to even reach not only the ear of Bill Gross, but as well of his fellow members of the board of Allianz, because even in the early 2000s, the terms of sustainability, the understanding of what sustainable investment would actually mean, were, if at all allowed, presented more in the appendix of a presentation. It would not make it into the first 5 or 10 pages of a presentation of any CFO towards investors. As we know, this has totally changed. Who is not disclosing on ESG criteria, or in my language, SDG criteria, would lose already in the beginning. And as one of, I think, the big hopes I would like to point out is that, for instance, this new law within the European Union, that anybody who manages other person's money, whether it is a bank or a family office or an insurance, and is not able to disclose now every single cent of their investment in line with sustainability criteria, illustrates that the policymakers have advanced. They advanced the speed. But in contrast to Hannes, I don't perceive the SDGs with the 169 targets as something outside of the thinking of ESG. It's rather, and it was rather, a 6 years process mentored by Ban Ki-moon. After Kofi Annan had started with the Millennium Development Goals, asking the member states the very simple question, what shall we do as of January 2016, when the so-called Millennium Development Goals, which were defined in a rather foggy way, let's reduce poverty instead of SDG 1, no poverty. that this process, which was a 6 years process, was not accepted and perceived by the financial community nor by the accounting community as their ticket back into becoming a trusted partner by society, because we all recall the nonsense reactions after 2008, when we had guys like the former CEO of UBS, Peter Kura, who tried to tell the public when they needed the bailout that what was called subprime, that they had no clue and they could never know what crime actually was done by his industry. Again, for somebody who studied philosophy, one was anyhow surprised that a term like subprime could be accepted, because there is no such thing like subprime. You are either prime or you're not prime, but there's nothing like a subprime. So if you just use this thing up here and try to implement it in the finance sector as well as in the accounting sector, we would have saved a lot of money. And in order to express my real anger, I started to publish together with Kofi Annan as of 2008 the Trust Meltdown report on an annual basis and presented it in Davos year by year for 10 years until Kofi Annan died. And then we declared that it makes no sense to even address the finance sector, because the finance sector obviously has no interest in learning from the shortcomings already before 2008, but absolutely for sure after 2008. And that is why I'm maybe not a pleasant podium partner for friends from the finance sector, because when I follow how especially the banks cut on research, but at the same time thinking that they can still continue with their offerings, that doesn't make any sense to me. The decision by the finance sector, and being allowed to do so by BaFin and all the others, that they put all their eggs into something what they call algorithms. And without having new standards and qualified standards for the accounting process, that you now take software to run over annual reports, and within the annual reports they do not even look at the non-financial part of the annual report, they only look at the financial sector, the financial part of the annual report, which has not improved according to Max Böhmle. So if you now have algos run over what, according to Max Böhmle, max is 50%, how dare can you come to a valuable decision on whether you should invest into stocks or not? That led to the initiative headed by the Director General of the UN, Michael Muller, 7 years ago, asking us if we could provide research, not by algos, but by human beings, and come up with an alternative. And the alternative is what we call the SDG commitment report. We have a team of analysts who are reading line by line how the chairman, how the CEO, how the CFO, and how the company in their legal binding annual report explained how they spent their money and what they are planning to do in future, starting with the annual reports covering the year 2016. So basically in April 19th, 2017, we presented the first results in New York at the UN, illustrating how the top 500 stock-listed companies were committed, how they explained what they had done and what they planned to do, according to this new framework called SDG, in the breakdown by the 169 targets. And we took a very simplistic approach. We created something what Apple, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft hated from day one on. We came up with a traffic light system. So we said those companies, green and yellow, should be continued to be invested in. Why? because in their non-financial section, the chairman, the CEO, the CFO, and the others are explaining what they are doing and what they plan to do in line with at least one or more of the SDGs. So these were green and yellow. Red were those companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, etc., who would not even file one sentence on one of the 169 targets. Nothing on energy, nothing on water, nothing on education, nothing on gender equality, etc., etc. And what we did April 19, 2017, was simply, we didn't say that these companies are good or these companies are bad. What we did was we simply disclosed research. We said, when you read line by line how these companies explain what they had done in the past and what they are going to do in future, we find something related to the SDGs, so we say it's either green or yellow. If these companies come to the conclusion that when they file their report to the SEC, that they are good by ignoring the SDGs, then we map them red, and we said those who follow these principles defined by 193 heads of states, September 25, 2015, you can only be invested in those who disclose information. And we gave these data to the former president of NASDAQ and to Joe Kajigal, who used to manage the UN pension fund with his 68 billion under management. And I can tell you, since this fund is running with real money, the cumulative return is 68% over the last 5 years. So it outperforms the MSCI world. And I will conclude here by saying everything what I was told in the 90s and in 2000 and in 2010 was proven wrong. When we presented this approach to Deutsche Bank, to Goldman Sachs, to whomever in the finance sector, they always told us, Roland, if you add ethical criteria to our brilliant investment decisions, this will cost basis points. Now, 5 years down the road, with all the ups and downs in the stock market from the last 5 years, you know, that was the biggest stress test you can think of, and still outperforming MSCI World. I think that's a nice start, and it illustrates we can do better. And that is what I would invite every researcher in the field of accounting, every researcher in the field of finance. Don't think that the SDGs are something completely else from outer space, not relevant. It's rather the other way around. As the SDGs, when you really read them, and when you look into all the different criteria of the 169 targets, which are really nicely presented by the UN, as if you would decorate your home ceiling. You know, usually these interior decor have these type of things. This is for the world, but the world includes, to a lot of surprise, the finance sector. The finance sector is not out of the world, although they behave very often as if, but they are not. So here is a very good toolkit. And I know from friends from PricewaterhouseCoopers and others that they do a lot in order to turn what you expressed very clearly, what is important to the finance sector, materiality. And we did the analysis of materiality already back in the 90s, which is not any easier or more complicated than to analyze SDG. But with the SDGs, we offer to the finance sector and to the accounting sector to come back to the world community and provide value, because this is what we need. And as long as the finance sector still thinks of itself, we don't need this and we don't need research. We have our algos. Sooner or later, the world will turn around and say, well, what we really don't need are people who believe that AI can fix everything, because AI is far away from really being able to serve us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Roland. This was a great discussion contribution. And the bad thing is we have only 5 minutes left. There are at least 10 questions I would have asking you, but I don't want to misuse my role as a moderator. And I'm pretty sure that other participants in this session would ask you 1 or 2 questions you could answer. Winning one from the chat is I interpret it in the way that the question could be: is there a life beyond SDGs? What is the perspective after the SDGs? Roland.
That scares me the most because I have to say, usually I'm extremely optimistic, and I still believe that we managed to implement the SDGs by December 2030. Where I get a little bit nervous is, what can I do if my daughters wake up, hopefully together with me, on January 1st, 2031, and then they ask, and what is next? The SDGs are very precise. And they are not only extremely precise, including the 169 targets, they are even more precise on by when they need to be implemented, which again is the very first time that this happened in mankind in history, that 193 heads of states agreed on a framework like that, plus agreeing on by when does this have to be implemented. And I can only warn all of us that we say, oh, it's a nice approach and it will help us, but we will not manage to reach this. And then in 2031, we have to come up with something else. I fear that the extremists around the world will take our failure as the proof point for them that reasonable people like all of us failed, and we need to come now and try their nationalistic, their simplistic approaches. And that's the only thing I'm a little bit nervous about. So okay. We have the 7 years and we need to use them.
Yep, you are right. And this opens another door. But Hannes, you had put forward a question in the chat, but I think you should verbalize it by word.
Yeah, the answer to that is quick. I was just wondering again, what was the name of the fund who outperformed the MSCI 100, that SDG fund that you helped putting up?
It's the SCR 500. I will email it to Georg, and then you can share it to everybody. It's at the same time it's online. If you go to www.ungsi.org, you find everything online. But I can email it to everybody, or I can put it here into the, if I'm
You can put it in the chat if you like.
I already found it. Thanks.
Do I know that?
Okay.
To do that?
Anna?
I can answer the question maybe of Francisco from the chat. He asked that maybe we need a new or changing economic culture to make strong sustainability viable. And yes, we would agree on that. And what Daniel Dahm oftentimes says is that yes, we can consider ourselves capitalists, but only if we consider all capitals relevant and not only the financial capital. And it is rather viable to concentrate on a market economy instead of the financial capitalism, where real value is valued in the right way, where externalities are integrated and valued in a way which also would be in line with what Roland said. The report can only showcase 50% of real truth because we don't have this true cost accounting yet. So we are far away from reporting what is actually the value we are creating or the value we are taking apart.
I just get a warning from the overall manager of the conference that we have to come to an end, which is a pity to me because the discussion starts to become interesting. And what I would suggest is, since we met each other on this occasion, we may maintain the contacts between each other. There are several takeaways. For me, there are two major. The one is that we all agree that integrated accounting is to be science-based. And that is a point I also wanted to, where I would like to build a link to the first contribution from on the fake issues. I challenged Roland to talk about his network of academics, of let's say very intelligent people who help him to find the best ways and the best analytics in order to make investments happen. We have not the time to go into that, but you should know that Roland is a master in organizing such kind of networked intelligence. And we once built the connection between all of us. I would be happy if we could continue our discussion beyond this conference. And for the moment, I can't do more than thank you very much on this. Hope to meet you all again on other occasions. Roland, we will meet you anyway because World Capital Institute has an interest together with you to go for a next COP28. When I'm rightly informed, venture. If that would be possible, we would be very happy. So for the moment, thank you very much, and look up the program for the next plenary session, which will start in a few minutes. There is a clapping of hands, as I can see, and I do it in physics. Thank you very much for all your contributions. See you hopefully very soon.